Hi everyone. Hey Kris, how are you?
I'm good. How you doing, Joe?
I'm good. Everybody, welcome to the back room, and this is episode 2 of season 2. And yeah, I love your your backdrops are looking great, Kris. Like you look
Thank
like
you.
you're in a cabin. Sorry, not a backdrop. It's a cabin, isn't it? You're in a cabin. Yeah, you're in a special cabin somewhere.
Well,
with
we
your-
can pretend.
I'm locked up in some concrete dungeon, which is that's a normal Saturday night for me. No.
It looks very realistic, except when we can't see shadows on your shoulder. That's when it kind of gives it away.
On today's show, we got 2 segments. One segment will be with Raj Thacker, who's going to be again talking to us about affirmations and insights. Also on the show, we've got Dr. SMB, and he's going to be talking to us about testosterone. And I'm really interested in this one because as I get older, I do start to feel that something's shifting, and I'm thinking if that's testosterone, because you don't really think about it, like compared to say someone your age who's got probably heaps of testosterone.
Well, yeah, I always say to people, and this is true, I was a very, very late developer. I remember being in high school and my friend could grow a full goatee in year 8. And like, I still can't grow a beard properly. So it's different for everyone.
Like there's so many myths. I'm hoping he's going to cover them because I was watching SAS Australia, and someone said, "Oh, do you sunbake with your balls out?" Right? And I listened, and he goes, "Yeah, apparently, if you sunbake naked and the sun hits your testicles, it multiplies the testosterone production by 2."
Whoa.
So see, I don't know if that's true or not, but like I literally went outside naked for a while. No,
Wow.
so there are all these things because testosterone would be a big thing for guys. Like I know there's foods and it's like tablets that you can have to keep it up, but the probably the best thing to do is to masturbate. The more you produce, the more you have.
Really? I would have thought the opposite, because some people have said that we have a limited number of sperm. So,
It's not sperm though. The sperm is sperm, but this is the testosterone.
Ah, yeah, okay. But I mean, like, people have said, even like to do with religion and stuff, it's like, don't waste, that kind of thing. So,
The sperm. Because when I remember when I got sick and I wasn't able to do anything. I mean, I noticed that my horniness was gone, and I spoke to my doctor, and that was because we did a test, and my testosterone was like literally 0.
right, yeah.
Right, and then once I got better, and I started doing, going out in the sun and doing those things, it went up. So, yeah, that'll be an interesting story. And you're going to be talking about trust. And I'm going to be talking about vulnerability, and we're going to be also doing a little section on family drama, which we're getting close to Christmas. I think we need to start thinking about what happens at this time of year. So it looks like it's going to be a really busy, packed, fun show.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. It sounds good.
All right, we'll be back after this break.
So coming up, we're going to be talking to Beng Eu, who is Dr. SMB, and he's going to be talking about testosterone and how that affects men.
Hi, I thought this time I would talk a bit about something that's important to probably everyone listening to this segment. It's about testosterone. I think testosterone is very important to all of us, and this is a somewhat controversial area, even amongst medical colleagues. So the issue I'm interested in discussing is whether someone is actually short of testosterone. So you might have a testosterone deficiency. And sometimes it doesn't present itself very directly unless you're aware of it, and you might need to ask your doctor to look out for it. The symptoms of testosterone deficiency can be quite mild and quite subtle, and not very specific. So you can cross over with a lot of other conditions that might actually confuse the issue. So the common side effects of testosterone deficiency are people feeling fatigued, lack of concentration, lack of sex drive, libido. You might have trouble getting erections, but also something like depression could be a symptom of a testosterone deficiency. Other symptoms that some people notice would be maybe a loss of muscle mass and an increase in body fat, but some of those changes happen naturally with age as well. So I'm mentioning because I think in terms of mental health, it's important if someone is depressed that we're aware that testosterone deficiency is one of the possible causes of it. Because if testosterone deficiency is an issue, then replacing the testosterone would significantly help someone's mood as well. So why is this controversial? The controversy exists where you have the natural cutoff levels for testosterone. If someone has very low testosterone levels, for example, in the testing is below 6, then there's no question at all someone's testosterone deficient. Then either your GP or an endocrinologist can do further testing to determine if there is a specific cause about why the testosterone is deficient. They'll look for, if there's no specific cause, they might decide to actually treat you with testosterone, which means you take testosterone replacement treatment, which is usually either a topical application like a gel or an injection. And there are 2 or 3 different injections you can have. The most common would be one that lasts for 3 months, so you only need to have a 3-monthly injection. There are other ways of doing it, like implants and stuff, but they're much less accessible and much less popular. However, if your testosterone isn't rock bottom, like if it's below 6, if it's between 6 and 10, for example, most of the labs show that below 10 is considered a normal level, but not everyone would recommend testosterone replacement in those cases. Part of it is because we don't always know what each person's natural testosterone level is like. And if you have, for example, a testosterone level of 9.5, it does mean that you are still producing a bit of testosterone yourself, even though it might not be sufficient. And the risk of treating it with testosterone replacement would be you actually suppress your natural levels, so it might be detrimental. So it needs some fine-tuning, and I would usually involve an endocrinologist in that case. But also, there's also controversy about what if your testosterone is just above normal? What if it's 10.1, 10.2, where it's sitting right at the bottom of what we consider a normal level? Even though it's within the normal range in the testing sense, but sometimes 10.1 might represent a very low level for someone. If someone's 35, for example, and the testosterone is 10.1, we don't know whether several years before that they might have a testosterone level of 20, for example. So this is where it's more subtle and quite controversial about when you replace testosterone. So I don't necessarily have any answers, but I think it's just something to be aware of. I think if you have some of those symptoms and it hasn't been tested, it's worthwhile asking the question about whether you are testosterone deficient. And if you are testosterone deficient, then to seek whether treatment is a good option for you. But it's not always the right option, but it needs to be explored a bit more. All right, I hope that's helpful, and I hope maybe some people will consider that if it has been considered before in the past. All right, till next time. Thanks.
Wow. I always find Dr. SMB's segments interesting. Like last time he did hair loss, and now he's talking about testosterone. And, how do you feel about the guys that use artificial testosterone? The steroids?
Yeah, I have to admit, I don't really know that much about, methods of improving someone's testosterone. I just thought that sort of thing was natural. But, if people can...
Well, think about it for a minute, right? Do you think, when you see someone that's really muscly and built,
yep,
do you think that they're natural?
I mean, obviously they could be taking steroids, but in terms of like that being dangerous.
The only reason why it's dangerous is because if someone is bigger than a normal, what a human body can do, and then you see those shoulders. Right.
Yep.
I think the only thing that's dangerous is I think that young people are now really into their body look. Like if you look around on say TikTok and Instagram, there's some phenomenal bodies on guys that are about 20. And
Yep.
so the danger would be if they were to take testosterone steroids when they haven't fully developed. They're still in
Yeah.
that period. Do you know what I mean? Yeah.
Yeah, see, for me, I kind of think of it like a longevity thing. I think, it's all well and good to be 20 and you want to go take some steroids so you can look good in Instagram and stuff. But, I've always felt like, if you're going to burn the candle at one end, it's gonna affect you. I mean, that guy, the British guy, can't remember his name, the bodybuilder. He's supposed to be the world's strongest man from the UK. And to do this one lift, he was talking about how it probably took off 10 years off his life because he broke the record. Okay, so I think fair enough, if you want to be the world's strongest man, you can take that risk. But if you're just wanting to put a couple of snaps on Instagram, I wonder if it's really worth the risk to go and modify your body like that and take pills that are probably going to damage you in the long run. So
yeah. I think that you just hit the nail on the head. I think it is got to do with the body image. Like I'm not embarrassed to say that when I was in my late 20s, someone said to me, "Do you want steroids?" And I tried it, and I have to admit that little period of time. I mean, I don't think I've done any damage because I've only done it once, but the results was, I could see why people would be addicted.
Yeah, because the results were quick, weren't they?
Not quick. It was just beautiful. It was beautiful. I just look at those photos and go, oh my God. Like everything just looked, it looks like those people on Instagram now. I had a flat six-pack. I had big chest, arms. And so it's like you're cheating. But you're right. It's like to sustain that, you need to take it all the time. And I wasn't willing to do that.
Exactly. Yeah, you do have to sometimes look at the long run. I mean, look at the bodybuilders that were, back in the 80s and 90s, like, Schwarzenegger, who was so pumped. You look at them decades later and they do have effects that, he has to keep working out to kind of maintain. And he had to slim down because otherwise they end up just having layers and layers of skin.
But do you think that's more vanity? It's a vanity thing? Because I thought the dangers would be more things like, I know someone that died, by the way, who was very, very addicted. And he died of kidney and liver failure.
Yep.
Because you're putting steroids. Don't forget, majority of steroids are byproducts of animals. They're animal steroids. A lot of people don't have access to medical steroids, so they're putting into their body like stuff they would give to cows, and that's what I did that. And so that to me is what your body has to filter that through your kidneys, and if you're doing that all the time, that's why I think that's a big danger. And then on top of that, you've got to consider the mental part of it, the steroid rage.
And I still think it comes back to this idea of balance, like you can go and work harder. Like even if you look at working, people can go, and get the results that they want short term, but there's always going to be long-term problems, like it just depends how you want to live your life, I think, because there's no way you can gain more. Like you might work hard and you might go, well, look, I'm putting in a lot of hard work, but every single gain is going to have sacrifice. You either want to sacrifice your social life or you want to sacrifice your old age where you've pushed the boundaries too much.
Yeah. I do think that there is a small association with, for myself anyway, that like I obviously did it because I didn't love myself. And I felt, I could walk into a room at a nightclub and I could have a lot of attention. And that, looking back at that now, I cringe at that I wanted that. When you love yourself, you don't need that validation. But so I think there's a lot of that in there. And also I think it's because right now, I think being a young man now, if everyone around you is doing it, there's going to be that pressure to do it because, people are seeing other people on those platforms and they're going, oh my God, look how much attention this person's getting. So it is got to do with that validation part. And do you think that men now have got a body dysmorphic problem?
I suppose they would. I mean, maybe not quite as much as girls, but of course they would. I mean, just to say a little bit about me, because I'm bringing my opinion here. I was the guy in school, even in year 12, who was the scapegoat for all the other guys in class who wanted to improve their own physical feelings about themselves. Because I was
the guy. What do you mean by
guy.
scapegoat?
Well, my nickname in high school was Scrawny, okay, because I was super skinny, and I wouldn't go to school without wearing a jumper, right? Because I was just naturally thin. I mean, you've seen my father, you know what he looks like, so that's the genetics. And so I remember there was a couple of guys in my class because I studied a mechanics class, right? And these other guys in class would come to class in tank tops, and I didn't dare wear anything like that. I just wear a loose fitting jumper. So for me, I was just trying to survive, and they saw me as someone that they could poke fun at, that could say like, well, I'm going to feel a little bit better about myself in comparison to him. So for me, I couldn't even play that game of, like walking into a nightclub with go do some push-ups and then suddenly get validation. So for me, it was a very different perspective. Yeah.
But I didn't. But I was. I got you. I need you to realize that I was you. I was also the scrawny one.
Yep.
See, so when I left school, well, I was scrawny, and I got teased the same as you. So I left school, and then I wanted to get through that, and so I remember, I'll never forget this day. I went to the gym and paid my $250. Yep. And I did a workout, and in my stupid head, I thought I was supposed to be bigger by that one session.
Yeah. Well, I think everybody does in a way. But you know what I think is interesting here is that you're telling me about that story about you went from skinny to getting the validation in the nightclub. I actually think that's a good thing because that's what young people are supposed to do to show themselves, and
I know, but we should do a whole show on this because there's a lot of stuff that goes with that. For example, when I got bigger and I got attention, I got rid of my friends.
Well, that's a personal choice.
I know, but that's what normally happens. Normally what happens is that you are in one group because you're one way, and then all of a sudden you get something else, and then that group wants you because you're big. And so looking back now, I can see how that was really... that sort of head fucked to me because I loved it, but then I really understood what it was like to be used, and I also got to see how other people would put people down.
And I think this is so interesting because it's like literally you have to choose who you want to be because no matter who you choose who you are, it's going to have sacrifices. You can choose to be the big man who everyone loves, but then you lose your old friends. It's just the way life is. So it really brings into question the fact that we do need to choose. But just one thing I want to say about that is I think it's actually good for you to have gone through that because you went from no validation when you were skinny to lots of validation, and you get that experience. You can see the difference. Whereas I feel like for me, I mean, nowadays I've got a little bit more weight. I still feel like sometimes I'm still in that phase because I didn't get to experience that when I was younger. So I think everybody learns at different rates.
The only thing I don't agree with is that I think that you can choose, but then I feel like now I've dismissed all the choices and I try really hard to, maybe through that experience, to accept everyone. Right? Like I remember when I was in that group and I would talk to the skinny guy and some of those people would say, why are you talking to him? And I thought, are we at school again? This is like a nightclub. Do you know what I mean? And I remember once a friend of mine went up to a muscle guy that I was hanging out with and said, hi, da da da. And then when my friend left, that muscle guy turned around and said to me, who's that freak? And all of that is the reason why I stopped it.
Yep.
Because I realized
you could see both sides. You could empathize with both sides because you experienced it.
Yes. And it's really quite terrible how some people, I mean, both groups do it. The skinny guys would make fun of the muscle guys. And at the end of the day, I think everyone just wants to fit in. And so that's where that's where the steroid things comes in and people take risks without realizing the side effects because they want that validation or that feeling of being, I don't know. It's like, Andy Warhol said, didn't he? Everyone wants their 15 minutes of fame.
Yeah, but it's also a notion of grass is always greener on the other side because I think until you've experienced the other side, we can't empathize with people. We don't know what they experience. And so, it's really important that you could see both sides so then you could empathize with both.
Yeah, true. Okay, we'll be back after this break.
Okay, so now we're talking about the idea of we cannot trust ourselves. So, Joe, what do you think about that statement that we can't trust ourselves? Do you think that's true?
I think that is true if you have an insecurity or you don't spend time working on yourself, because the only way that you're going to trust yourself is working on yourself by looking at yourself and answering those questions for yourself. But most of us are conditioned to always look for things outside of ourselves, meaning we look for direction, right? And
Mm.
so, that sometimes can cause issues. If I don't trust that my opinion is valid, then I may not say it because the other people in the group may not agree. So it takes a bit of courage. But I think trust comes with when you surrender, when you say, I don't care. And I think
Yeah.
that could come later in life, or it may come earlier when you have good parents that push you. Mine came later in life.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of things in society where people are kind of like, when people say you have to love yourself or something like that, people go, oh, whatever, and they don't really get it. Or when people say we're all one, like people get the feeling. Even myself, sometimes I think, oh, that's such a pain because I don't see it. It's so hard to see it. But
Sure, but that's the problem, isn't it? When people don't see it and they dismiss it, that just means that they're not open to trying, which is again proving the point.
yep,
It's like you can't expect when they do that. It means that they are waiting for something to come.
yep.
All the things that we talk about in life, like trust, every single thing has to come from us.
That's true. But I think a lot of time people will, they'll obviously forget the philosophical idea that that what we're seeing out there is our reflection. We're still in modern society stuck on the idea that I do stuff and then I get physical responses just by me physically doing it. We don't realize that, we're like a major part of what's happening around us.
Yeah. And I guess it's also stages, and it's also society's shifting. You were talking about the 70s and the 80s and things that we could get away with then, we can't get away with now. But,
Yep.
when I look at that question that you asked, the first thing that I thought of
What's that?
was I feel like right now I can't trust myself to not be distracted. You know what I
Okay.
mean? Like, I want to trust myself and say that I'm going to be healthy. I'm not going to drink alcohol. But there's too many things that are causing me personally to sort of break that sometimes. And I do consider myself to be disciplined. But I think now there's so much being thrown at me, so it takes a lot of effort to, like, not, for example, get caught up in the stress from the news. So I've got to turn that off. Or
Yep.
I've got to, like, not walk down the aisle in the supermarket where they sell the biscuits because I don't want to have chocolate. There's
Yep.
just so much variety and options that it's hard sometimes to trust. I mean, think about Tinder, right?
Yep.
Once upon a time, you go to a bar and see one person you like. Now, it doesn't end.
Yep. That's
So
right.
can you trust yourself?
We've gone from like occasional stimulation around to like it being constant with the news as well. Like everything is just constantly in your
Yeah,
face, so much stimulation.
all
And
the
that's why
time.
sorry, I was going to say that's why all these kids in schools and stuff are just bonkers because they just got constant things going on. They're just constantly thinking, who's sending me messages? I've got to finish my download. I need to do this. Oh, I haven't finished streaming. So it's like constant.
I
They don't have
know.
any rest. Whereas when we grew up, of course, we had times of like, well, the TV show's not on for a few hours, so I literally have to just sit by myself and
Yeah, we
entertain
did have
myself.
we didn't have, I remember we all, the good thing about that was, remember, we all used to watch TV at the same time. So if something
Yep.
was on,
Yep.
now you choose when to watch it, but also wonder what the brain must be like now versus when we were young.
I think it's just overstimulated, but I don't actually think it can't go back. I think it can go back, but it's just that, like, if you go on a binge of just like watching movies, like 5 movies in a row, you come out of it and you're just like, oh man, I feel terrible. And that's kind of what society is like now. We all like, why am I depressed? Because they're constantly being stimulated. You look at, sorry to use this analogy, but go to a supermarket or, sorry, a department store, have a look at how many babies are crying. And my theory is the babies are always crying because there's too much stimulation. And when you get too much stimulation, it gives you a kind of like, what next? What next kind of thing. So, yeah, I
Yeah.
think having too much and not having that time to just kind of relax and read a book or
So
just play outside.
so that trust thing comes in play there. Like, why don't people trust themselves to realize that and do something about it? Instead, they seem to be trusting that what they're doing that is wrong, right, is the right thing. Because we all know now, there's been there's been talk about Facebook and about social media and about streaming and about
Yep.
what you described. So why are people not trusting that information and making a difference? Why do they, why is it that they're waiting for the disaster? It's interesting, I think.
Yeah, can I just go through these points? I was just looking at. So this is one example of how we can't trust ourselves. Okay, and the subheading is we're biased and selfish without realizing it. Okay, so if you can think of yourself on on a freeway. Okay, so you can imagine if you make a mistake and you go to change lanes. You go, oh, what's this idiot doing behind me? He's right in my way. God, I hate people like that. So you kind of justify it. But if somebody moved into your lane, we immediately blame them because we have that kind of filter of not knowing them personally. Like if you were to see them in a face-to-face, you'd be like, oh, no, it's fine. You cut in front of me. It's no problem. But because we can't really communicate with them, we have this automatic defense system where we assume, like we think about all the reasons why we made the mistake. Like, oh, I couldn't see him. Oh, somebody distracted me. But then we condemn other people without thinking at all about their situation. So it's kind of like we have. So
what are we not trusting through that? Are we not trusting that we're able to see them, and so we trust that we're the right ones? Is that what you mean?
No. It's more just talking about how our image of reality is distorted. Okay, so if we bring it back a stage and say like, this is just one example of how. It's not balanced, okay? So the way that we judge others, the way that we judge ourselves are very different. So it's more looking at it like that.
Yeah. And I'm relating it to myself, and I do go back to my first answer, and I really do believe, because I don't do that anymore. Okay, so I really do believe that I know that took a lot of work, and that's got to do with surrendering.
I was just going to say, it's the same as like when we're online and we're chatting on Facebook. And you see someone's comment and you go, you're an asshole, you're a prick. And, you could maybe do the same thing somewhere else and you're like, why is everyone so mean to me? It's that kind of bias where we know all our own reasons for doing things. We justify our own reasons for doing things. But when it comes to others, when we can't see their faces, when we dehumanize other people, through Facebook, social media, or driving on the road. I think they're very similar situations where we just assume everybody else is nuts.
Yeah.
To validate our own story.
And that's a really simple way of just saying that a lot of people live on the surface. Because my way of processing things now, it's happened since COVID really, has been, and I think I've shared this with you guys, is that I just imagine everyone's an avatar now, right? So it doesn't matter if I cut in someone's lane, and it doesn't matter if someone cuts in my lane. At the end of the day, I now understand that that's just an event that I have to choose to react to, and I choose to react to all events as an observer.
Yeah,
I don't react. Yeah.
Yeah, so you've gone beyond the level of judging people that you can't see, but a lot of people are still stuck in that. Where if they don't know the person, they write them off as crazy or stupid or whatever.
Sure. So that's a saying, right? That the reason why that person's doing that is because they're projecting something that's missing in them, and what they're not trusting is the trust part comes in when they're not stopping and saying, "Holy shit, I've got a problem.
Yep.
I've got to change this," and that's what people aren't doing. People feel valid in especially nowadays. I think people trust that what they're saying is valid, but really all that's saying is look at yourself and ask yourself why. That question isn't being asked. Why am I angry at Donald Trump? Why am I upset at the protesters? Why do I want this? Ask yourself, who cares what other people are doing?
Absolutely.
Focus on yourself. So I don't know how we can change that. That trust thing is a big thing. People just need to trust themselves again, that they're allowed to look at themselves rather than looking at it as an easy way to just blame other people, because it does make you feel better for a short period of time.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing. But unfortunately, I mean, you're very developed, Joe, but like I think a lot of people are still in that phase of blaming others and looking for scapegoats in terms of like things that they can blame. Like Donald Trump's a good one, just blame him for everything. And Hitler is a good one where people just go, Hitler was crazy.
Well, as long as anyone that does anything that we don't like, we're going to blame and tell off. It could just be something as simple as a girl falling over at the races today.
Yep.
And we go, oh my God, look at that trash bag. But in reality, the reason why you're looking at that trash bag is because you're a trash bag.
Yeah, well, you've got that. Yeah, exactly. There's a part of you that feels like that you are that, even if you're not exactly, like you've blocked out that part of you. Remember Eckhart Tolle was talking to Oprah one time, and Oprah was like, really? Are you sure that anything that I get upset about is because of the shadow part of me? And he goes, that's true.
Yeah. Well, it is. And it just, all it really is doing, right, is we're in a generation right now that people get more mental stimulation from looking at disastrous or problems with people versus good things, right? So that means that they're not trusting themselves. I know you said that I'm evolved, but I am human. I still make mistakes, and I've worked really hard. But the point I'm trying to make when I say that to people is that you have to just start. And so that's where the trust issue is. People struggle to trust that they have to work. Like a lot of people say to me, oh, you've been doing it for how long? I don't know if I could do that. But they're doing it anyway. They're doing the opposite. It's no different. It's the same with affirmations, right? If I say to you, can you say, I trust myself every day? People say, oh, it's too hard. But they don't realize that they're actually saying every day, I don't trust myself.
Yeah, that's right. And I think this is the whole point, is the way that our minds work with, when things are difficult for us to say, like, what's the word? The cognitive dissonance that goes on in our brains. We find it very difficult to see our own trappings, but we can see other people's trappings so easily. We go, oh, you're such an obnoxious bastard. But then we don't see that side of ourselves. And our brains are designed that way to kind of stop, to keep that idea going.
But, I just say to people, my clients, like, aren't you, one of my common statements is, aren't you exhausted? Because, we do know a lot more than we know.
Yep.
And so when you ask those questions of yourself, the why question, one of the questions should be, why am I doing this over and over again? You need to, that just takes a bit of awareness. For me, I was doing it because I didn't want to look at my pain. Right. But then when I was forced to, I was able to look at my pain to surrender. And that got me through on the other side. So, most people will get to experience a moment in their lives when they have to look at themselves. But I really am an advocate now to encourage people to do it without a crisis.
Exactly. Yeah, you want to do it before, all hell breaks loose
today.
in your
Just
life.
start now.
Yeah.
The good thing is, I have to admit, don't you think it's a good thing that all these famous people now are talking about mental health?
Yeah, I think it's a good thing. Yeah, definitely.
So it gets people going, oh, if that guy can do it, I can do it. So it's changing the landscape.
Absolutely. So I just want to go through a few points, Joe, so you can we can head it that way. So the second one is, okay, this is talking about people in general. We don't have a clue about what makes us happy. Okay, and this psychologist was talking about it, and the example he uses is that we kind of like inflate the future scenarios of our life, because everybody has that situation where they go. I remember as a kid, I'd say to my mum, oh, if I get this toy, everything will be perfect.
Yeah.
And it can be kind of crazy. But we all do that no matter how old we get. We look at things in the future and we go, that future event, once I get that, my life will be complete and I won't feel bad anymore. But at the same time, we look at things in the past and we go, oh, that thing really hurt me. And because of that happened, I am just damaged, or I can't get over it for whatever reason. Okay.
Yes.
And it happens to be other people who tell us, and they say, why are you letting this thing bother you still? But we don't see it ourselves. We think, oh, because that's the way it is, that's the way it was, I need to continue to be terrible or something. So what do you think about that?
Well, I call that, so the future thing is fantasy. So everyone has fantasies of what they want, which I think, it's good to do fantasy stuff, but you need to do fantasy stuff in the moment. So how do we make something be in the moment? We make it in the moment by either talking about it because it's out, or by writing. So you have to be really cautious not to do fantasy work in your mind, because then it's a story. And the reflection of the past is either a warning, like you said, or it could be also a reflection of a time that was happier. So what that really is saying is that in the moment, they might be depressed and they don't trust themselves in the moment, because the future is going to be better and the past could have been better, or there could have been an incident. what people aren't doing with that statement is they're just they're misguided by not knowing that the moment is all you've got.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, they start
So
to
trust yourself now.
Mm,
Doesn't matter if it's good or bad,
yep.
because it's all you've got.
Yeah,
Right?
that's right. But sometimes it can be tricky because those future things can be so like tantalizing. People can get stuck in the future, literally.
I know. But if you do an audit on that, right, try this. It's a really good experiment. Get a bit of paper and for a
Yep.
week, write down all the times that you go into the future and fantasize, and you will realize that you've lost 3 days.
Yeah, exactly.
And when people see the time, mindfulness then becomes something that they might encourage themselves to do, because what they want to do is be in the moment. So when you again said to me, oh, you're evolved, surrendering means that you need to surrender the moment. And that's why in the moment, there's no issues, because this is all it is. And it is what it is. Right now I'm talking to you and my brain is totally empty because I'm with you. Right? But when some people can be with people and they go into the future. So imagine that. Imagine being with a partner and not being present.
Yeah, it can be hard. It can be really tricky to like to keep that out of the mind. I don't know if you've ever listened to Jim Jeffries, but he's one of my favorite comedians, and he had this line which he said that was really interesting, where he was saying that he goes, we've all been taught to believe in our dreams, and he goes, but dreams are terrible. He goes because like he gives the example of himself. He goes, I wanted to perform at my university. He did. Then he wanted to be paid. He was. Then he wanted to work in a proper theatre. He did. And then he wanted to be a headline act. And then his final step was he's performing in front of thousands of people. He's got his own Netflix show and all that sort of stuff. And he goes, and tonight I'm going to cry myself to sleep. And it was such a funny line, because he was basically showing how people get depressed because they're just like, oh,
I know,
next step I'll be happy. Next step I'll be happy.
But that gives you a really good he's actually giving you the answer within his statement.
Yeah.
And that is, when you live, you should never have expectations, right? And so he had expectations by each of those goals. And each of those goals then are only seen as good. So he's done no preparation for the other side.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So he's crying himself to sleep because, this is the interesting part of this, right? So getting a room full of people, like 10, 20,000 people at a comedy show, and sitting in the kitchen and eating a grape should feel the same. And that's what people don't do, because when you're not living in the moment, right? The grape could easily be called boring, right? And so then the moment is being missed, because everything in your life should be a moment of being there, being even the sad parts. But what we do is that we don't like bad things, right? So we avoid them and we only look for good things, which becomes an expectation, and expectations always lead to disappointment.
And again, I say that thing about the kid crying in the department store. It's like this is happening all the time now with people, like that they to go from one place to another. I'm talking about young people. If they have to go from one class in their school to another class, that walking journey of like 5 minutes to walk from one classroom to another is our problem, because they can't. They have to keep with their laptop open so they can check on their updates. That's ridiculous. And this is how you want people to be happy eating a grape. It's impossible.
No, but again, when I talk from my perspective, I'm not saying I want them to do that. I want them to watch and listen so they get inspired to understand what to do. They've got to start. Dismissing it isn't going to make them change.
But I think
everyone has to start somewhere, right? Like I remember I was like those people with the computer, but I've changed. So all I'm trying to say is that nothing's going to change for them.
Yep.
They've got to do the work. And so another thing that I'm really strongly an advocate for is that we need to make mental health solution work the same as the way we treat dental work. I brush my teeth every day. I gargle. I do that twice a day. Yep. Why can't we do something that helps us with our mental state? So that could be doing mindfulness with a grape.
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, obviously with social media and everything, it's quite difficult for a lot of people. And also this whole idea of being isolated, I really feel like that's a major thing.
See, I know, but that's a big annoyance for me, right? So I was really annoyed with the amount of times that people would say, I'm bored, and I'm bored. All they're really saying, if we interpret that, is they're saying, I don't love myself.
True.
You should never be bored with yourself if you would learn to love yourself.
But I think also
People avoid that though, Kris. They avoid doing the work.
True, but I think also, Joe, we need to remember too that like a lot of times things are circumstantial. Like, for example, if you have someone who's like, they might be isolated, and then you take them out of that environment and you put them into an environment where there's sunshine and there's some people to talk to. It can be a completely different experience. Not necessarily doing more work, but also just having.
Well, they could have done that, couldn't they? Everyone got
Sorry?
Everyone got an hour to 2 hours of going outside time.
That's true, but I feel like sometimes there are some circumstantial things which like like I use the situation of like university versus high school, let's say, or let's say primary school. Primary school, you're always next to your best friend. You sit there every day. That it's very kind of, you understand the situation. Whereas university can feel very isolating in terms of going to different classes at different times. It's all very kind of flaky, and I think sometimes. When we have such isolated lives with social distancing and stuff like that, sometimes if we just were able to have a routine of just having some sunshine and, like you said, doing simple things, that would go some way to creating more peace.
But I really need. I agree with you, but I still am going to fight you against this. Is that It is all about the individual realizing that their life has value. I'm not, as a therapist now, I am a effective coach, and I do not see clients if they're not at least open to the awareness.
Sure.
Because otherwise they're going to want me to do the work. Everyone has to have the awareness where they realize inside themselves something isn't right. Because at the end of the day, everyone has to be responsible for their own life. Right? So sitting on the couch and feeling isolated should be there should be a moment when you ask that question, why? Right, but people then project and they blame, like you said. Now that's the problem. The problem is that there needs to be more discussion about people stopping, because if you go to any self-help conference or read any book, I'm not saying anything that is new. Everything has to be about you taking responsibility, but that's the problem. People don't trust themselves that they can.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
They look at someone else and they might say, he can do it, but I can't. It's too hard. That's crap. That's not real. Everyone's got the same opportunities. Everyone. Right? Even the most disgusting situations. Like, again, I know that now because I couldn't walk.
That's true. Yeah. And look, I understand that like everyone has, their life is reflective of how they're approaching it. I'm just saying that there are some simple things that would make a big difference, because
I know, but without that awareness, they're not going to do those simple things.
Of course, yeah, they wouldn't consciously make the decision themselves to do it. Yeah.
Well, it's easier to be, go back to the first point. Again, those points of being distracted, plus what we're talking about now, it becomes easier to be, and again, I'm not saying this in a bad way, listeners, but it's easier to be a victim listening to the story. Oh my God, this blah, 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 versus the adaptability part of you that, again, acknowledges something doesn't feel right with my body. Because if you are fine with watching Netflix all day through lockdown, kudos, because you're fine. But the majority of people aren't fine. And that's the problem. They don't trust that they can make a difference.
That's right. Yeah. And for people to acknowledge that, hey, I can make a difference, that's the biggest step, I think, because a lot of people will just be like, oh, there's always something that they can say, well, I can't because.
Okay, coming up next is Raj Thacker, who's going to be talking to us about connecting with nature as he follows through on his segment on affirmations and insights. Now, nature is a really big thing, and so he really takes us on a journey in a park and shows us how that can happen in our everyday lives.
Hi friends, this is Rajiv Thacker from Melbourne, Australia. Today I'm in a beautiful surrounding, nature around me. And this evokes very calm and peaceful thoughts. And every time I look around nature, it always teaches me and surprises me as well. Whether it is the climate around, the birds, the trees, any and everything. But what it teaches me most is to be in harmony with each other, and that to give, and give selflessly. The trees do that all the time, even as simple as a shade. When they give shade, they never ask for anything in return. On the contrary, they're bearing the heat and the light on our behalf. When it gives fruits, it gives freely. The birds, they all chirp and sing as if there's one big symphony. One starts, the other waits. When the other starts, the third one comes in with you. It's beautiful. And the best part I like is that trees shed their leaves in autumn, knowing too well that they'll spring back in due course. And this is what we need to learn, is to let go of the dead in us, that which is not serving us any purpose. Only then can we imbibe the new and emerge the new within us. So today, let's sit in silence and go within to see any thought, belief, perception, or values that are not serving us anymore. We may have in the past, but not anymore. We'll let me get rid of it by loosening it and letting it fly away. It could be as simple as the way I talk to someone, or the way I react in situations. And to do that, premeditate to understand how you can respond differently, whether it is losing your patience in a traffic jam. Don't think before you leave your home that there will be traffic. And how will I behave this time? Maybe by enjoying some more music in the car, or just seeing how others are working towards us going through the traffic. Keeping more time on hand so I'm not rushed. And this self-thought itself is mindfulness and meditation. So to you, I would say, sit back every day and look at only one aspect, one belief that's not serving you. Pick it up, loosen it, and let it go. That's how you will get new ones emerging, which will be more beneficial. Because once we've done our spring cleaning, guess what? There's new vibrancy, new energy around us. And that's what we fill in and serve like the trees do. With that thought in mind, I'm wishing you a life full of service, selfless service, joy, and freedom. Trust this helps, my friends. Bye for now. This is THACKER from the land down under.
recently I've been doing a lot of podcast interviews with coaches from around the world, and this topic seems to be coming up over and over again, and that is vulnerability and the reluctance for men to go into that space. Now, in my conversations, there's been a lot of insight in regards to the side effects of not going into vulnerability, and we're going to talk about that on the show. So, Kris, do you consider yourself to be vulnerable?
Yes, I know what it's like to be afraid to be vulnerable. But I would also consider myself to be a bit more of a kind of a feminine type male, I suppose.
Feminine energy.
I understand both sides. I think that I could, I can see myself being vulnerable many, many times in my life. But at the same time, I can distinctly remember when I was younger, walking up to a pack of girls, and they asked me a question or something, and I was like, I don't know, and I was trying to be tough. I was trying to be super tough because
Wow.
I had realized at that point that being nice or being kind or showing any kind of emotions was kind of bad for a guy. And I learned that not by anybody telling me. It was just, you could see what was going on, and all the guys that were popular were these kind of big muscly guys that would be, super tough and whatever I want, that kind of thing.
Well, yeah, it was like the friend, what you were doing, because I relate to that too, being gay and having female friends at school,
Yep.
you go into the friend zone, don't you?
Yeah, but I mean,
these girls see you as a friend, so you don't feel comfortable to make that move because the guys that were being tough weren't really being tough. They were being a little bit aloof. And so that's what I think girls and guys like. It's that aloofness. Does he like me? Doesn't he like me? Oh my God, you're my boyfriend. You're dumped. Oh my God, he dumped me. All that sort of stuff is...
Yep.
And what about now? Do you still see it that's the way it is now?
In terms of men being able to be vulnerable?
Yeah.
Yeah, I do. I think there's obviously a big push now for men to be, you can cry, you can show your feelings, but I think the reality is that it's not respected. And I hate to break anyone's heart with that, but I just think as a guy, there is an expectation, an unwritten expectation that we have to be tough.
Sure.
Because no one wants to be around a guy. If you've seen that film, that Brendan Fraser film, Bedazzled, right? It's a remake, but anyway, there's a scene where he's pretending to be this emotional guy, and they're on the beach, and he's with his perfect lover, and he goes, oh, that sunset is just so beautiful, And these guys come up, these like rough guys, and they're like, hey babe, want to get a coffee, And they're like kicking sand in his face, and she's like, I'm just like so tired of you being so weak and weepy, And it was a bit of a joke, but basically it was showing that, at the end of the day, the man has to kind of be tough. He has to show some masculinity so that the feminine energy or the female can be allowed to relax. Because when the masculine energy is all like, oh, I don't know, then the feminine energy gets very uncomfortable, So it's really interesting.
It is. I mean, the only thing that I think that is a bit flawed with that is that movie is old. Yeah. But secondly, is we know now as a society, as a mental health practitioner, as a man, that not being vulnerable is the reason why men commit suicide.
Yeah.
See, so the side effect of that is that we were conditioned to be all those things. I agree with you. I guess we come from generations where that's true, but I think moving forward, parents are realizing that we have to let boys cry. We have to let boys be vulnerable. And then that will change the way that, that whole thing about we can't, that's what's changing. That's what's breaking the roof.
But think about this.
Men are starting to cry now, yeah.
Yeah, I think about this. I think it's really interesting that people are saying well, these are the results of not allowing boys to cry. Okay, I get that. And a lot of boys do need to cry and feel like when they do get emotional, when they get hysterical even, that they're not going to be ostracized, because a lot of times their male friends will be like, what the hell's wrong with you? Just grow up, or be quite callous, right?
Is that, are your friends saying that to you actually now?
Well, look, it doesn't take long. If you go look at a group of guys, young or old, and my friends were no different, they will chastise each other routinely.
Yeah. So even now,
what do you got? You got a woman's drink. don't drink that. You're a woman if you drink that. You know.
I don't know if that happens now. Does it?
Well, I think it still does. The
maybe
men are still wanting to prove to each other.
Yeah, but like there are going to be certain groups, but I do think that there's enough information now for there is also change. Do you know what I mean? Like
there is change.
So we have to sort of help those people that are, that are in that space, because the thing is that is the reason why men crumble, right? So men have to. It's not about crying. This is about just men being allowed to have emotion. So, say for example, if there's a child, the biggest one is death. A lot of men, like I'm experiencing it right now. One of my friends' father's brother died, and the father is having trouble crying, and so we've been talking about this for a long time. It's really just about the permission, and the permission has to come from us men.
Yep.
And so, not to burst at your bubble or to be rude, is that I would say to the listeners, if you can't cry in front of your friend, then get better friends.
Well, that's what I would say. That's true, but I think you'll still find even this day and age that a lot of guys cannot shed a tear.
Think about it when, say, Wall Street loses $1 billion. What happens within the first 2 hours? They have a few suicides.
Yep.
Right? What happens when a male a wife has an affair, or that she leaves him? We have suicides. What happens when someone can't deal with a bullying situation? We have suicides. So men are doing that because they don't have the tools to be vulnerable. Yeah. Right? Vulnerability that's the opposite of confidence. When you don't have vulnerability, you have nothing.
Yeah, but I think the point is with people who are, let's say, getting angry too much or popping, right? The thing is that they have to be able to, if popping is not a good outcome, then there does need to, I think, be a range of ways that people can express themselves. There is. Yeah, but it may not just be crying is my point. Because I think a lot of times, maybe what men want, possibly, is to be like validated, like they might want to feel like,
But what's wrong with crying though, Kris?
Well, there's nothing wrong with crying. I'm just saying that I think...
So again, but be careful just to say that men, there should be other ways. The reality is that, like you said earlier, everything should be allowed. And there are ways for men to deal with that, but they're not taking it up. It's called therapy.
Yep. I definitely think that it's definitely good for men to be more in touch with spiritual things and emotional things. There's nothing wrong with that. I'm just saying I think sometimes there's accepted ways of things happening, and there's also unaccepted ways. And I think the anger thing is obviously a big taboo at the moment, where it's like you don't want to see anyone get angry. But it's just a way to release steam, basically, all the stress.
I know, but but the thing that the word acceptance is and not acceptance has to be removed, because we can't encourage anger and not encourage crying. Anger is the word; it was bad. Like we've got evidence now of what anger can do. The steam thing is the responsibility, right? The steam thing is the responsibility, because anger for men, we know, can turn to domestic violence. It can turn to a fight at the football, and men need to learn to control that. So that's the man's responsibility, not the women, not us. But everyone has to take responsibility, and that's what men haven't done. They're not putting their hand up and saying, "I've got an issue with my emotions. I don't know how to handle them." They're dismissing them because we got permission to do that. But that's over now. We can't do that anymore.
I used to work as a teacher, and I have seen a kid who was out of control in a school, and the school wasn't prepared to do anything. And I was so upset with that situation. So I'm not trying to invalidate anyone's experience at all. I'm just trying to make the point that I feel like in order to control our emotions, I think we need to be able to feel safe to express them in whatever way they come out, whether or not it's crying. Or like maybe just like shoving your friend or something, like that's just like, okay, I needed to do that, sorry. But if it's in small things, then we can control it much more. You never want to get to that stage where people are just seeing red. That's when it's gone way too far.
But see, this is good. We have to have this discussion next time, because this is a big discussion. Because again, that's what entitlement is. You just said it's okay to push someone to get our frustration out. That's not on anymore. We can't do that anymore. It's not acceptable.
If that's okay, I'm saying in a situation where if that's two mates might be like, oh yeah, whatever.
Sure. So I know, but
like, it has to be defined.
Think about what you said about what happened to you at school.
Yep.
So don't worry about the two mates because they got it. But think about how other boys, other men do that to kids that they see as weak.
Yep.
That's now they're frustrated too.
Yep.
Because they're going to use those poor kids like you experience, and they're going to bully them and push them around. So the two mates thing I get, because it's not called anger, that's called mates. But
And I think
when we talk, so the definition needs to be defined, because when we talk about vulnerability and anger, it doesn't normally come up with general everyday topics. It comes up with those moments where there's danger, right? This is what we're talking about today, the reluctance of men. The reluctance.
because I think of it like this. It comes down to mutual respect. And I think if you have mutual respect...
So we don't need to talk about that. That's not part of the topic. Because if
Yep.
that's the case, then it's not the problem.
Yep.
The problem is when you got bullied, a lot of those boys that were bullying you had issues of their own. And instead of being vulnerable and saying, my dad beats me up at home or my mum doesn't love me, they took all that emotion and they pushed you.
Yep.
And that made them feel better. Now, what we want is for those boys to be vulnerable so they don't push you.
Yep.
Because that's the issue. The issue isn't if someone gets really angry and he goes and screams out loud to his friends, that's not a problem.
Yep.
The problem is the side effects, the suicides, the murders, the bashings, the wives getting raped. That's the problem. Because those men that aren't being vulnerable, they're experiencing the side effects. And that's the issue with stuff. Like, so we have to really call out, like, that bullying stuff, has to be called out, because people can fall over and kill themselves by hitting their head or whatever. And there's been so many court cases where, I pushed someone because he was gay.
Yep.
Right? And I felt like I had some anger inside of me, and now that boy's dead.
Yep.
That statement we can't say that anymore. That boy who pushed him has to learn how to deal with his emotions. And I think white men have been so entitled to say all those things that we have to treat ourselves equally.
But I feel for myself. I'm just saying this is from my perspective, growing up with two sisters, and my mother raised me most of the time. I have never, in my entire life, disrespected a woman.
I know, but you're in touch with your feminine side, so you're lucky.
Yeah, but like I don't know. I feel like I don't feel like less of a man than anybody else as well. I think that it's, for me, that's my world. That's my world.
I know.
That we just should respect each other.
But imagine if you lived with a father who beat you up because you have that feminine side. Every time you came home and spoke and you tapped into your feminine side, because I know clients like this, your dad slapped you across the face and told you to man up. But you couldn't because you were being yourself. So as much as you tried...
I didn't grow up in that type of household, so I was lucky. I saw a father who was very caring and understanding.
You were lucky. So imagine the majority of people out there haven't.
Exactly, yeah.
So that's why we have to be very careful, and we have to support the men that can't, because those men, they have been so entrenched in thinking that that's the only way, but it's not the only way.
Yep.
I've got a client at the moment that I adore, but he's a truck driver and he's tough as bricks, right?
Yep.
And he struggles with this whole topic. Now, his life is fucked. Like a mess. It's a mess, right? And I don't want him to do something silly because he can't handle his emotions. So we're going slowly to give him permission, because exactly what you said earlier, his dad would tell him that, man up, he's tough. So he now has this belief at 50 that he can't be vulnerable, and he's about to die because he has major anxiety, right? Major. I'm not talking about little, major, because he doesn't know what to do, right? And all he needs to learn is to give himself permission that it's okay to be uncomfortable. It's okay to be weak. It's okay to be sad. It's okay to be anxious. But no one ever taught him what to do with those emotions, ever.
Yeah.
Right? So now what do? He's on the verge of killing himself. Do you know what I mean?
He needs a safe way to express himself, yeah.
Well, it's like, and then when they die, they think that that's the best solution because they still don't believe that they can be honest and vulnerable to say, I'm weak.
Yeah, well, at the end of the day, they want to be themselves, but they don't know how to express it.
But they're only half of themselves. You can't just be strong. You have to know what weak is. Everything has to have the yin and yang.
Yeah, exactly.
Families. Now, what can I say? We're coming close to Christmas, and we know historically that Christmas or any sort of religious public holiday like Easter and maybe other similar holidays around the world can cause tension and anxiety for many of us when it comes to connecting with family. Now, what can be some of the things that pop up when we're dealing with, interacting with family at a longer time frame than maybe a visit? And some of the most common things that come up are behavioral things that are habitual. So one of the things that I notice is that when I see my family, I always slip back into being a teenager. I don't know how that happens. I know that I really, really consciously try to make an effort not to do that. 10 minutes in and I'm feeling like I'm 15 again. It's just the way that interactions occur, the way that people speak to me and so on. So being prepared for that really helps me not to get upset or to take it personally, because it is a trigger. Families have a lot of dynamic and a lot of energy and a lot of emotion, because it's probably one of the only times that you can't just walk away, right? You can, but most of the times we don't walk away when there's a conflict. So sometimes we need to learn to deal with the angst and the uncomfort and the shame and all of the things that come up with what has happened to us in childhood and what we choose or choose not to experience as an adult. One of the most important things, I guess, as anyone develops with their mental health is to really assess the past and notice, what have you made certain events from the past mean about you? And then how are you letting that influence you today? For me, obviously something still gets triggered in me, so I haven't dealt with certain things in regards to why when someone says a particular thing to me that I feel 15. It doesn't really impact my life that bad, because when I leave the venue, the house, or wherever I am with them, I can turn it off. But I know that if it was something that may cause an argument, I know that would be when I would maybe want to address it and talk about it and try and solve it. But more importantly, look at myself and see why. That's the most important question. Why am I letting my dad say that and make me feel uncomfortable? What's going on for me right now to make me feel like I'm not adequate when that comment gets made? Why do I feel uncomfortable when I'm with the whole family, where I remember certain things from when we were younger and how I felt then? All those sort of things are things that I need to take responsibility for. Everything will become a projection otherwise. Otherwise, I'll blame and I'll push and I will ignore, rather than trying to understand, why am I not being an adult? So as we get close to Christmas, as we now get more and more active with seeing people because lockdown's over, just be mindful of the triggers that may cause you to react to a family member or a family situation. Happy holidays.
All clear, 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 all clear.
That was a great show.
Yeah, really interesting. We're like
fighting
over each other to get a word in.
I know.
It's really
I
good.
think we had our first little bicker. I love that.
That's all right. It's healthy to have disagreement. That's how we learn. So I'm
gonna bring the masculine out of you, and you're gonna make me pop. What's the word? How did you describe it? You're gonna then pop. But this is what I love about you being on the show, is that I don't want it to be polite. I want it to be a fiery discussion about men's issues, because it allows the listener to then make their own choices. So thank you, for sticking your ground, because you were really sticking ground, which made me push more, and you pushed, and that to me is a robust conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think
I love you, right? I love you.
We learn so much more when we're actually, when you listen to someone who has a different background and you go, oh, I never saw it like that. So, every time we have these conversations, we learn a little bit more.
But see how we're starting to talk about it already? We could talk about it for hours. We're supposed to be saying goodbye. Everybody, see you next month.
Okay, see you later.
I'm Joe-y Busuttil, and you are?
I'm Kris Welsh. Bye.
And you're on the back foot. See you next time.